take this for however you want. I literally wake up every day, and it used to be my biggest passion that would give me a rush was sports, playing sports and watching sports. Over the course of my life, from different experiences I've had, the opportunity to help people of all ages build confidence, develop skills, and shift their mindset, that is what I enjoy doing every day. Who in here knows what motivational interviewing is? Okay, so that is very common. Most people, as a matter of fact, you're probably only the second person I've ever asked this question to that has actually known it. So motivational interviewing is a concept that the medical profession has used incredibly successfully. And it started to get people to stop smoking. So this was a concept that they used to get people to stop smoking, and now it's used. Counselors use it, physicians use it, specialists use it, and it's very common. And there are two main concepts in motivational interviewing, and I'll go over it in a little bit more depth in a moment. But the number one concept is to get people to embrace and be comfortable with change. The second thing I want to share with you about motivational interviewing is that it relies on helping people come to conclusions on their own instead of being told what the right answers are and what to do. So when you think of persuasion, influence, motivation, it's not you doing the persuading, influence, and motivating. They're doing it for you, but you're guiding them through that process. What I'm going to train you and walk you through tonight is not for a specific set of skills. It is for life skills, life communication skills. That's what we're talking about. So you see this slide. People are not resistant to change. They resist being changed. We don't like to be changed. We don't want people telling us we need to change. And the concept I always give to make an analogy here is think about how we're raised when we're kids. We are raised where our parents are telling us what to do. They're not asking us their opinion in most cases. They're telling us what we need to do and how to be safe and how to be successful. Then we go to school, and the teachers pick that baton right up, and they start telling us what to do. And then we go through college, and we graduate, and we get a job, and we have bosses telling us what to do. So we're constantly growing up in an environment where people are telling us the right answers, telling us what to do, and we're not often given a voice to really share our opinions, thoughts, ideas, feelings, emotions, etc. Well, that's what motivational interviewing is. It's giving other people an opportunity to shake off that hierarchy and those triggers we all have about being told what to do, and it turns the tables. That's what we're ultimately doing. These are the three goals of motivation and persuasion: elicit and strengthen a person's willingness and confidence to make changes, draw out individuals to make their own conclusions, and effective questioning causing insight, which equals curiosity, which equals wisdom. Okay? That's what motivational interviewing is to a T. We're always told to be memorable. I don't really care about being memorable. Because you know why? Because if I meet 5 of you tonight and I give you all my business cards and you get home and you're talking to someone and say, oh boy, I saw this speaker tonight, he was great, and so on and so forth. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to do anything with me or for me. It just means you remember me. So being memorable, that's not really what you're after. Okay? How do you motivate people? And think about what Prudence is talking about. All of you in this room who know some or all of you, I'm sure you all want to help each other. Like, I'm sure there's no convincing of that. But Christy here, Christy gets home and she's really overwhelmed because she likes so many people in the group. She's like, where do I begin? I only have so much time. Because Christy has personal responsibilities. She has life responsibilities. And so to actually engage in trying to really go out of your way and help me get a job, that takes time. That takes genuine effort. So how do you motivate someone to how do you motivate Christy, Prudence, to say, Christy, I know you have so many people you could help, but you really should help me.
Move in with them.
Well, I mean, and I don't mean it in a selfish way, because I don't think anybody in here is selfish. That's not my point. But it is tough. There are only so many hours in the day. So part of what you're trying to do, Prudence brought up a great one, is how do you engage and motivate other people? Is it hard to get HR people to look at your resume? So layup question, right? Okay. Your resume. Who's got something on their resume right now that if I looked at any of your resumes and I looked down that first page, that would make me go, wow, that's something I haven't seen. That's a unique skill. That's not how every resume I see looks like. Who's got one? Anybody got one of those wows on their resume that you want to, Bob?
Well, on my resume it says I take organization from chaos to clarity.
Organization from chaos to clarity. Would that make you, if you were reading Bob's resume, would that make you be curious to what he means by chaos to clarity? It would me.
Good.
Okay, so that's a good one. There are 5 ways you could engage. There's more than 5, but I'm simplifying it for tonight. There's your resume. There's your cover letter. There's LinkedIn. There's interviews. And there's networking. Those are your 5 ways to engage. Cover letter. My 22-year-old son, who really struggles with motivation and passion, by the way, where's Steve? Steve, he is not drinking my Kool-Aid, for whatever it's worth. But the point I'm trying to make is, he's written the best beginning to a cover letter I've ever seen in my life. And his opening paragraph in his cover letter is 2 truths and a lie. Has anybody ever heard that? 2 truths and a lie. And he says, you know, truth number 1, truth number 2, lie, I'm already working for your company, or something like that. But it catches your attention. It's engaging. It's different. Now with LinkedIn, forget about the profile. I'm not even talking about the profile. I'm talking about when you want to motivate people to, as Prudence said, what's your LinkedIn message look like? Is that motivating? Is that engaging? Or is that something that everybody sees? When's the last time you've actually shared your LinkedIn reach out message or outline or template or structure and said, hey, why don't you look at this? Does this look like it's kind of unique or engaging? I would do that. Because same thing, just like HR people, your colleagues are getting this stuff all day long. How are you wowing other people? How are you engaging other people to be interested in you? And I'm going to say one other thing before I call on someone else. From an emotion and an energy perspective, if you're not one of those people that walks in a room and you have that kind of charisma where people are just latching onto you and want to be around you, which is most of us, then what's your hook? Right? Because then you really got to engage people if it's not your natural emotion, energy, and enthusiasm, or your smile. Okay? And I'm not being facetious about the smile part. That's a big deal. Who has a habit in here they wish they could change and they haven't been able to change it? Anybody? Mine's biting my nails. Anybody have one? Biting my nails. Doing it for 25 years. Can't do it. Yes?
I swear. Did you point at me? Or the guy behind me?
No, I'm pointing at you, Kathy. Yes?
I sway when I
You
say
sway? Okay. And so why would you change it though? What's wrong with that?
because everybody says, stop swaying!
And why does it really bother people?
I don't know,
Distracting.
it doesn't bother me.
Perhaps that's why you haven't changed it. So, but maybe it's distracting for people, right? So think about when you motivate people, when you're trying to motivate people, what is it that's going to motivate them to change it? So in the case of finance, what were the things that you could have said or done, not statements, but questions and things to motivate them? That's what we're going to practice tonight. Okay? All right.
So Mark, why do you do what you do?
I love helping people. So let's stop right there. Anybody ever said you love helping people? Right. Boring. Okay. That is absolutely not a differentiator. You are not different because you say you love helping people. Okay? So now Janice has to really get to, and this is one of Janice's specialties in wellness, is really getting to the root cause. What is my root why? Okay, keep going. So I love helping people.
So why do you love to help people?
Because it makes me happy.
Really? Why does it make you happy?
Oh, God, I've been using those answers for so long, I gotta actually think now. So it makes me happy because when I was younger, I became a father very young, and I didn't have a support system in place, so I had to really kind of learn how to model certain behaviors for my kids and as I was growing my professional career. And so because I didn't have that support, I like to be able to offer that support to others so I can save people from some of those headaches or heartache that I felt. So when you think about your why, it doesn't have to be a sob story. What it has to be is pivotal moments in your life. So for example, I'll give you two extreme, very quick examples. I was coaching a guy who was a former ad executive. And I said, Glenn, what's your why? Why did you go in advertising? He said, Mark, I got to be honest, when other kids, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and when other kids were watching Scooby-Doo, I was watching the commercials. Well, that's interesting. That's not something you'd hear every day. We make this mistake when people say, tell me about yourself. We want to talk about our business qualifications and why we're worthy. Big fail. Big fail. You're going to get to talk about that stuff anyway. So don't waste that airtime talking about that. Talk about what drives you. Talk about what motivates you. When you come to these meetings, if you're to walk up to someone else, how do you know who you like here? You just like everybody? Or maybe you like someone who you have commonalities with. Maybe you like someone who you can relate to, that has the same interests as you, that has the same amount of kids as you, that has the same job industry that you do. The point is that be human. Forget about your professional qualities. Be human. Let people get to know what's unique about you. When you are selling yourself, if someone baits you into having to talk about yourself, the best way to do it is we'll call it the anecdotal third-party process. So let's say, what's your name? You don't have a name?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to talk? Okay. All right. So who would I call it on? Is it Shailene?
Charlotte.
Charlene? So let's say Charlene says, Mark, what is one of your greatest qualities as a trainer? Instead of answering what that question is, I want to say, well, you know what, Charlene? Here's what my clients tell me. Okay? So instead of talking about yourself, if you talk about it in a third-party way, where you're referring to a former coworker, a client, a colleague, somebody, it doesn't sound like you're talking about yourself. So it's a very effective way to sell yourself without being blatant about it. I want you guys to be vulnerable. I want you to share a personal detail about yourself that other human beings can connect with. Was there a moment at Wharton where that supports what you're saying, where it was a discussion with a professor, sitting in a class, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, what was it? Yeah.
All right, so I took, nerd alert, just in case. I took options theory as a course at Wharton. And options theory is all about learning how to model and then evaluating derivatives. And the professor was in front of the board one day, going through this thing, and we're all sitting there taking notes really fast. And at one point, I'm looking at the equation, and he had made a mistake. And everyone's sitting there taking notes, and I go, and he's still going. And
This is the professor?
This is the professor. And I finally said, Professor, I think you made an error in your calculation. And he paused, he turned around and went, no, and kept going. And of course, being who I was, I didn't. I went, well, no, actually, I think if you look here, the slope is wrong. And the guy sort of looked at me, glowered at me. He stepped back from the board, looked at it, went like this. He turned around and looked at the whole class. He's like, look, you all don't understand this. I have 3 kids at home under 5. I haven't slept in 4 years. And he takes the eraser, erases it, and changes the equation to what I said to him.
That is an A+. It is hard to get people's attention these days. So you've got to do everything in your power to engage them. And storytelling and having a great story like Wiley and Steve had, that's what it's about. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you. Okay. And engaging others. Isn't that what marketing's all about? Engagement? Right? That's what marketing is, engagement. So what you're able to do as a kid is you were to engage people. Engage people to following your lead. Okay? Yes, you organized. Yes, you created, but as a kid, I loved, getting people engaged in my ideas, ways to pull people together. You see where I'm going? That's what you did. And that's what a marketing coordinator, there's a lot of things in marketing, but that's an example. That's your story. But you have to tie it in. Guys, it's very important, and gals, it's very important to connect. It's one thing to know what your passion is in your backstory, but you've got to be able to connect it to where you are today. That's an important part of this. Okay? So for me, sports broadcasting, when I was sports broadcasting, so a lot of times when I do public speaking or presentation training, I use broadcast communication techniques. So there's a tie-in there, right, that actually goes. But you have to have the tie-in. That's your job, is to capture people's attention with engaging stories. And when I think of all the people over the course of my career I've helped with public speaking, presentation skills, and engaging other people in conversation, it really frustrates me when people are hard on themselves about public speaking, because I want to tell you guys something. Public speaking, the running joke is it's the #2 fear after snakes. But the thing about public speaking is, I think a lot of people are not comfortable with it because they've never been taught how to do it. Or they don't have a process to do it effectively. Think of anything in life that you've never been taught how to do, or you don't have a process that you have to do. You're probably going to be scared of that too. Like, it makes sense. So, but it's not this huge unattainable goal. You have to decide, is this a skill that you don't have to spend 100 hours learning, but if you really, and remember, this isn't to get a job, everybody. These kind of skills we're talking about is to blow people away while you're at the job, right? It's not just getting the job, it's thriving when you're there, personally and professionally. Job titles. For those of you who've come to my trainings before, you know that if I was to meet Steve, and Steve says, oh, I'm an investment banker. Nobody cares about your job title. Nobody. It is not an interesting topic of discussion. Unless David came to this today saying, oh, I hope I meet an investment banker today, then nobody cares. Okay? So part of being engaging is having an interesting thing to say about your job title instead of your job title. What can you say to describe your job that's a core skill or core requirement for your job that would get people curious to ask you more information? So that's another tip I highly recommend for you guys tonight. Your goal in motivational interviewing is to get someone to a point of ambivalence. Isn't that bizarre? So the reason why you're trying to get someone to a point of ambivalence is because when people think they have to change something, there's an emotional fear and attachment to it. So they start out really emotionally scared and fearful, and you want to pull them off that ledge, get them to an even keel layer of ambivalence, so then you can get them to a point of persuasion and coming to conclusions on their own, so they'll do the behavior you want them to do. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's weird to want to get someone to ambivalence, but that's actually what you're doing. This is not what motivational interviewing is. And just so everybody knows, before anybody even asks, this is not a foolproof solution that works with everybody in every situation in your life. However, it's been used, I've taught people to use it with their kids, with their spouses or significant others, for leadership training at work, for employee engagement and company culture, for sales teams to work with prospects and clients, for customer service people to work with their colleagues and clients. Every aspect of the corporate culture motivational interviewing plays. So it can be used across the board. Okay? We all know the expression, curiosity killed the cat. This is it. Curiosity saved the human. The idea is start being curious. Okay? When an HR person doesn't respond to you, or you don't get a job, you get turned down, what goes through your head? Lots of things. Why? Lots of things. How many of you at times feel bad about yourself and look at yourself and go, oh, well, I guess, and I'm not trying to be melodramatic, I guess I'm not good enough, or I guess I didn't do a good job in the interview, or I guess this. or too old. But that could have nothing to do with it. You don't really know. Bob and I talk about how do you really assess your interview performance. When you get in the car and I was to say to you, how did you do on the interview? And you say, pretty good. If I'm in that car with you, I'm going to be like, how do you know? And then if you look at me and go, well, I mean, they smiled a lot, they laughed a lot, they seemed to like my answers. Okay. But do you have an assessment tool to gauge your skills, to know where you need work when you go on an interview? Because if you don't, then it's just in your head. You don't really know. And if you start piling on yourself, so be curious. The goal is not to look at yourself only. I mean, you should evaluate yourself, but the goal is to be like, why is this happening? You know? Motivational interviewing, these are the 4 steps we're going to go that you guys are going to practice. Writing reflex. You know what the writing reflex is? When someone asks you a question, the reflex to tell them what the right answer is. We don't want that. That is counter to motivational interviewing. So ironically, the first step, the writing reflex, resist the writing reflex. Think about when you have to, when someone, you need to give an excuse for something. Alex? Alex, you're late for work. Alex, why were you late for work?
I had to bring my daughter to school.
Right, there it is. See, I trapped him into giving me an excuse. I don't want him to give me an excuse. Okay? So the writing reflex baits people into giving the right answer, or baits people. That's why everybody gives excuses, because people are wanting to know what their excuses are. Right? Okay, listening. There's 2 kinds of listening here, everybody. Everybody knows what active listening is, I would assume. But let's talk about reflective listening. Does everybody know what reflective listening? Okay? Reflective listening is, if I ask Tina a question, and I say, Tina, what is your biggest fear right now? No. If I say, Tina, what is your biggest communication challenge in getting a job right now? What do you think is the biggest thing standing in your way? Well, let's say Tina says, let's say her answer is, you know, Mark, I think that right now I just don't think my resume is engaging enough, and I just don't think my networking skills are really where they need to be. Reflective listening is me restating what you just said. Okay? It's just an example of showing that you're active listening. But reflective listening is critical in motivational interviewing, because when someone explains something to you and you paraphrase it, if you're not right, that's their chance. Well, no, Tim, that's not what I meant. And it gives you a chance to discover if you heard it correctly. Does that make sense to everybody? Reflective listening is critical. So as you do this and you pair up, understand when you're going through this, you have to reflectively listen to confirm what you're hearing is accurate. All right?
I'm not sure I followed what that was.
Reflective listening?
Yeah.
So reflective listening is, if you are a smoker, okay, and I was having a conversation with you and I said, well, how come you haven't quit smoking? And you said, well, to be honest with you, I just really enjoy it, and I think, you know, we're all going to die at some point anyway, and so on and so forth. Well, then I'm going to reflect back, okay, so I just want to understand what you were saying. So you don't have the motivation to quit smoking because you enjoy it, and there's all kinds of health risks, so what the heck, who cares? That's what you're saying. So by me reflectively stating that back to you, that's your opportunity, if I'm not right, to go, whoa, that's not what I meant. Okay? Because part of being successful is, if you didn't hear it correctly, you're going to go down the wrong path. Make sense? Yes?
How's that different than active listening?
Well, because active listening, you don't necessarily do that. If I'm listening to you, Rick, actively listening, I could just be nodding my head. I could be taking notes on what you're saying. I could be making eye contact with you. There's lots of ways to actively listen. Reflective is actually stating it back. Right? Because active listening doesn't mean you're necessarily saying anything bad. You could just be acknowledging it.
I thought it was, so that's why I'm asking.
Fair?
Maybe just a different term. Because I mean, I've heard different things. I've heard just listening, I've also heard it called mirroring, and I've heard it called like active listening, where you hear what the person says and then you restate it back.
Restate it, that's what I thought active was.
Yeah, I've heard confirming understanding, so let me confirm my understanding.
Right, but that's the definition of active listening, confirming understanding, and there's 5 different ways you could confirm understanding when you're listening. Reflective listening is restating it back, okay? Okay, third, effortless empathy. Everybody here know the difference between, please speak up, this is important. Does anybody not know the difference between sympathy and empathy? Everybody understand sympathy versus empathy? Okay.
No.
No? Okay. Sympathy is, let me start with empathy. Empathy is something you've also experienced. So Greg's dog just died. And I look at Greg and I go, oh man, I'm sorry. I know that must be really tough. I've dealt with that too. Sympathy is, my dog never died, but I still feel bad for him. That's the difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy, you have to experience it. Sympathy, you're just feeling bad.
I hated that dog.
So empathy is what the generic or standard empathy is just that. You're having a conversation with someone and you say, geez, that must be tough. You know, boy, I feel bad. And that's the end of it, right? There's nothing else. That's the empathy. Effortless empathy is something you do throughout the conversation, authentically and genuinely. You're not even having to think about it because you're just connecting with the person and empathetic in their different characteristics in play. So, what's your name? Lauren. So if Lauren, in the smoking example I gave, maybe I had someone in my family who had a similar situation in Lauren. So in the beginning I say, yeah, geez, I feel bad. And then as we keep talking, I say, geez, I know my grandmother went through that same thing. And you're finding ways throughout to maintain empathy, but effortlessly. You're not having to work at it, okay? And lastly is ambivalence. So you're trying to get the person into a point where you've talked them off the ledge, and whatever habit, behavior, attitude you're trying to get them to change, they're not so emotionally attached to it at the end. Okay? You know when this works the best? When it completely goes off the rails. And when you're talking about stuff that you never ended up planning to talk about in the first place, because then it's just a natural conversation. So it's designed to be 10 minutes, and you guys are going to see when you try this, the hardest part about motivational interviewing is you are not allowed to make statements. You have to keep asking questions and listening. Now, if there's an opportunity for you to say something back, you can say it, but you have to ask another question. But you can't give the answers. You can't say, well, you know what you really should do? This is the best way to do this. You can't say stuff like that. That's hierarchy behavior you're trying to avoid. This is something you would use in managing other people all day long. Okay? Think of someone who works for you that doesn't seem really engaged. They're not following your directions. They're not sending projects in on time. They're not doing things. This is where you would use motivational interviewing. Think of companies you work for that have changed policies or changed rules for their employees. And those leaders have to actually break those news to the employees. You would use motivational interviewing. Or for customers. So it's a way of getting people to embrace change. And I'm going to give you a very quick anecdote that will summarize. My brother told me a story. A patient walked in, he was using it on him, and the patient said to him, Dr. Altman, don't even try this. I know exactly what you're doing. You're doing motivational interviewing. And so my brother said to him, so what? So, is it going to change our discussion at all? And so the guy goes, no, I guess not. Because it really isn't a trick. It's the way you connect with other human beings is to be empathetic. It's to listen. It's to practice these skills. Part of my challenge is no one's sitting at home or in their office, CEOs, CFOs, CTOs going, you know what? Boy, I could be so much more effective as a leader or a professional if I knew motivational interviewing, because no one knows what the hell it is professionally. So this is the thing, like it's hard to kind of get people to understand the value because they don't know it.